Okay, here's the edited version of the text, removing the extraneous information and focusing on the stories themselves. Ghost. This story is based on real experiences of Jesus Romo. My name is Jesus, but my friends call me Chewy. I'm a trucker. Since I was a little kid, I started in this profession. My father, may he rest in peace, took me on his trips on the roads through Mexico. I learned to drive a truck when I barely reached the pedals. Over time, I became an experienced trucker like my dad and worked in many companies. Nothing strange ever happened to me. Nothing beyond the usual accidents caused by the imprudence or stupidity of some people. I carried a lot of people in my cabin, learned things from them, and heard stories about roads and legends from the towns I passed through. But nothing ever happened to me. I didn't see anything, either, for many years, but my luck ran out. I experienced something that left me marked for a long time, something I still remember and worry about. At the time, I lived in Linares, Nuevo Leon. I started working for a company that transported sugarcane. I was on a trip in a Kenworth, the trailer full of product. I left Tantoyuca, Veracruz, heading for Laguna de Mant. The road was quiet. Almost reaching the unloading point, there was a military checkpoint with a long line of truckers waiting to be checked. It was inevitable, so I relaxed and waited my turn. Fortunately, we passed through quickly. As I was at the checkpoint, a soldier asked me to get out while others checked the cabin. I told him I was going to Laguna de Mant to unload sugar. He checked my documents, the manifest, and let me continue. I drove about 6 kilometers and saw something come to the edge of the road. It was night, so I turned on the high beams. As I approached, I realized it was a woman with strange red hair, a flowery white dress, and a mesh jacket. When the lights hit her, I could see that her flats-type shoes shone in a peculiar way. The weirdest thing was that she seemed to be standing on the edge of the road, without moving, looking straight ahead. I felt a little scared, because when you saw people like that, there was a risk they would try to rob you or throw things at the truck. So I started flashing my lights as a warning signal and reduced my speed. As I passed by, I saw that she was behind me. It seemed strange because I had seen her looking forward before. I could only see her red hair and the dress wiggling in the wind. Thinking that maybe she needed help, I did something I shouldn't have. Curiosity won me over, and I stopped a few meters ahead. There wasn't much traffic, so it wasn't a big problem to stop. I immediately got out of the truck and ran towards the girl. When I saw her, I noticed she had her head down, as if in sadness or some tribulation. As I approached, I asked if she was okay, if I could take her somewhere. When I said this, the girl turned in a very strange way, very fast, as if reality were seen frame by frame. In an instant, what should have been the face of a pretty young woman turned out to be nothing. Absolutely nothing. A huge hole could be seen in the middle of that head. It was dark and disturbing. Seeing this, terror invaded me. I went backwards, trying to get away from that horrible vision. I fell on the pavement because of my nerves. As I saw that thing with its faceless head pointing straight at me, I dragged myself away, without stopping to look at it. When I got in, I ran as fast as I could, my heart pounding in my chest. I got into the truck and started driving. I didn't want to turn around, but in the rearview mirror, I felt that the girl had suddenly appeared, still without a face. I concentrated and floored the engine to get away. It was impossible. It was something I couldn't believe. But I had seen it, and felt so cold that I began to tremble and feel sick to my stomach. When I finally got to the lagoon, there were already several truckers waiting to unload. I parked the vehicle and got out, vomiting. I felt terribly bad and was shaking uncontrollably. Some drivers who were nearby came over to me, asking what was happening. Unable to speak, I sat down and drank some of the water they offered me. After I calmed down, I began to tell them what I had seen on the road before arriving. I expected them to look at me strangely, to label me a crazy drug addict. But instead, they looked at me knowingly. One of them, the older one, said that she always appeared in that section. According to people, the girl had been run over. Others had a more credible version, that the young woman had already been abandoned dead, and that a trucker had killed her, using a hammer to crush her head. That's why she appeared without a face. The truth is, no one gave me a convincing reason for that apparition. I didn't want to know more about the matter. After delivering the merchandise, I had to return to the company. I couldn't sleep for many days. I had nightmares and even felt that the girl was getting into the cabin, and I could see her on one side of me. That made me quite tense. My family had to cure me of the fright. Apparently, it calmed me down a bit, but then they sent me back to the sugar mill to take sugar to the Mant Lagoon. That made me nervous, but I didn't want to panic. I calmed down and handled it without any more problems. It was about 10 at night when I stopped at the military checkpoint again. A soldier who went to check me asked the same question as before, and I answered him the same. But when I told him my destination, he looked at me surprised and smiled in a way that bothered me. And even more when he told me that he had passed through there before going to Laguna. I answered yes, but I felt that I was shaking. I told him that I always did it because I knew that there were many crime problems in that area. The soldier responded with a chilling statement. Well, there are criminals, but besides that, several trucks and buses have already passed through that have reported seeing the young woman who disappears in that section later. A patrol was already sent, but what can you do with that kind of thing? Without saying more, he laughed as I started sweating. I didn't want to see that again, so I started the truck and drove very fast. As I was about to cross the section where I had seen the soul, I saw with relief that there was nothing there. I passed without turning around and thanked God for preventing me from seeing that. But then, I saw that the head of the young woman was peeking through the rearview mirror. When I saw her, I swerved slightly, almost running me off the road. When I looked again, there was nothing. When I got to Laguna de Nueva Cuenta, I was very bad. The terror clouded my mind, and I couldn't even maneuver the truck. Some companions had to help me. After that night, I didn't want to go back immediately. I waited for dawn to be able to return, and as soon as I did, I quit the company. I never drove in that area again, for fear that something would appear to me on the road. The girl by the tunnel until a few days ago. My friends and I started camping on weekends. We always got together and went in the same car to a forest outside the city. To get there, we had to cross a train tunnel, which was very high and extremely dark. Though the lights illuminated it, it remained dark, and on top was the road we had to cross. Everyone avoided it because, according to them, many suicides had occurred. None of us believed in those things, so it was easy for us to cross there to get to our destination faster. Due to the vast vegetation, the place looked dark and lonely. There was even a lot of fog that night, but it seemed safe enough to cross it without problem. Everything was going well until we reached the middle of the road. Suddenly, my friend screamed and slammed on the brakes. Some of us were sleeping and woke up scared, but suddenly we all went quiet when we saw a girl with a long dress standing in front of the car. Her hair was long and messy. The dress was dirty and torn at the bottom. It was only for a few moments, but that froze us all. Despite the heat in the car, it felt cold, a cold that you feel in your bones and makes your hair stand on end. She stayed still like a deer in headlights. The silence was interrupted by a train passing under us. Though all this happened in a fraction of seconds, I think people who have gone through something like this know that it feels like an eternity. With the distraction of the train, she ran and jumped the security barrier. We were all stunned by the situation. One of us got out of the car to see what had happened. Some decided to follow him so he wouldn't be alone, while others stayed in the car. With fear and everything, I went to see too. The light emitted by the tunnel wasn't enough to see much. Then, we could see that the train was stopping. Trains can't stop immediately, but we did see that it stopped. Two men with lanterns came down and ran to where we were. With fear and curiosity, we decided to stay to see if they had also seen what we saw. When they got to the tunnel's entrance, they didn't go to check where the girl had fallen, but to where we were to ask if we were okay. We answered yes. They asked us if we had seen the girl jump off the road, and when we answered yes, they said, relieved, "It's good that this time no one was taken. It turns out that she has caused many accidents in the area, and there's always someone who dies when that happens. Luckily, no one was hurt by that incident, and we just got scared seeing something like that. I don't know if the girl didn't want to take anyone that night, or if she's still waiting for the opportunity to take the next person to go through that place. I haven't gone through that place again, and I hope I don't run into her again. The wet passenger. My name is Diana Franco, and I'm 26 years old. I'm originally from Aguascalientes. The story I'm going to tell you happened about 2 years ago. At that time, I was working for a company in a municipality not far from the capital. I worked in one of those new industrial parks that are a little far from the population. I remember it happened in October. I remember it so well because the days get more intense in those months, with the end of the year approaching and us having to meet the production goals. I'd already had a week of shifts that went past 11 o'clock at night. It was a pretty heavy job, so I chose to take my car so I could get home a little earlier and not have to travel on the company transport. One Saturday, the work was delayed and the day lasted until 2 in the morning. It had been raining all day. The cold was penetrating, and I had my hands and feet covered. All I wanted was to get home and rest. I thought of taking a shortcut that, although quite desolate, would lead me to the main road that would take me home. Thinking and thinking about the fatigue I had, I finally got up. Just then, the rain stopped. The car wipers weren't very helpful, and the visibility was low. I was 100% focused on being alert in case a car came out of the side roads. I was also afraid of getting a flat tire, since with the heavy rain, it would be impossible for me to get down to try to repair it. The rain was starting to cause damage. Water entered through the cracks in the floor of my car, and the situation was getting worse. I didn't have interior lights. I was looking for something to prevent the water from getting more and more into my car. Meanwhile, a huge lightning bolt fell the moment I glanced without thinking through the rearview mirror. To my great surprise, the moment I looked at the back of the car, I saw the figure of a person sitting and crouching, as if hiding so that I wouldn't see her. I tried to think that everything had been a product of fatigue or my imagination. I thought about stopping the car and taking a breath to meditate on what had happened, but I decided to continue. I was driving very nervous, and fear was starting to take over. At the end of the road, I saw a convenience store, and I decided to calm down a bit and have a coffee. The lady working there noticed my condition and asked me if I was feeling well. I don't know how or why, but I started talking to her about what had happened to me. She tried to calm me down, saying that everything had been a product of fatigue. A little calmer, I decided to go back to my home. I hadn't paid for the coffee, in my hurry and shock. When I came back to my car to get my purse and then get the money, it was in the back. When I tried to look for it on the seat, I was struck by the fact that one part was wet, like when someone wet sits on your car. I couldn't take it anymore. As best as I could, I asked for a taxi. My nerves weren't giving up, and I thought about leaving my car at the store and going back the next day for it. And so I did. When I came back by car, I was already calmer. However, I noticed that the tires were low, so I went to a tire shop that was nearby. I told an older man there about how I had to leave my car in the store parking lot. I also told him about the experience I had gone through at night. The gentleman remained silent and looked at me strangely. He told me that it was not the first time he had heard about someone disappearing who was passing by that highway at late hours of the night, or that although the car that was passing by broke down, or an accident, Finally, he told me that I was lucky to have only gotten a fright. Alfredo's warning. I would like to share an experience that I had a year ago. I haven't told it to many people since it makes me sad, and I'm also afraid that they'll call me crazy. I'm a trucker, and I work for a company in Tucson, Arizona. Regularly, we only travel through the southern states, from California to Florida. This time, I was destined for Tennessee. My day started at 4 in the afternoon. On that occasion, I was already feeling a little tired. I regularly started at 8 in the morning. When I left El Paso, Texas, my eyes started to feel heavy. I still had 3 hours to drive, so I was determined to follow my path until I finished my 10 hours of driving. It had been about 20 minutes since I had left the city, and I realized that I could no longer stand the drowsiness. I closed my eyes for a few seconds, when suddenly I heard the voice of a little boy who told me not to sleep. I woke up very scared, nearly going off the road since I travel alone. In the 25 minutes where this happened, I found a rest area. There, I decided to finish my day of work and park my truck. I went down for a while to take care of my needs and stretch. When I was going back to my truck, I saw that on the passenger side was sitting an 8 or 10-year-old boy. This scared me a little, and I decided to investigate. But when I opened the door, I didn't find anyone inside the truck. Realizing how tired I was, I came to think that maybe I was just hallucinating. I decided to lie down and sleep, and when I lay down, I didn't turn off the light. Then, when I was more asleep, the same voice of the boy woke me up. This time he told me about the light, asking if I wasn't going to turn it off. I ended up turning it off and covering my head. After being so tired, I was very sleepy. I haven't heard from the child since that day, and I haven't seen him again. But a few months later, I had to transit on the same part of the road. I noticed that there was a cross with stuffed animals, so I decided to stop to thank him. Something told me that that child was called Alfredo, which surprised me to see that the cross said the same name. Now, every time I pass by that place, I leave him a fan and a toy as a thank you since he saved my life that night. The man who was already dead. I have a short story that I would like to tell you. About 6 years ago, I was walking down a street at dawn. I was a little drunk because I went to a party to drink. Well, as I know the whole neighborhood, I didn't worry much about coming back. When I was walking home, there was a skinny man walking towards me. I didn't give him much importance and kept walking since it hadn't been the only time I'd seen him before. Months later, I was with a girl, and when I saw a photo album of her, I recognized the man immediately. I asked her if it was her family, and she answered yes. Then, I told her that I had seen him at night a few times. She kept quiet for a moment and told me that that was impossible since he had died a long time ago because he had been run over. I stayed by his side at that time. I didn't know what to think because I had seen him several times at night. From that time on, I changed my route to return to my house at dawn. The bridge angel. My sister had to live through something very strange. At that time, she was in high school at night. One night, she was about to go home and had to go through a pedestrian bridge. As expected, she and a group of friends intended to cross under the bridge, waiting for the right opportunity to run by, dodging the cars. She tells us that just when she was about to start running, a girl also dressed in white took her hand and told her to help her cross the bridge. She accepted, and instead of running with her group of friends, she crossed the road, going up the bridge. Something more disturbing is that while my sister was crossing the bridge holding the girl's hand, she spoke to her as if she had known her for a long time. She even asked her how she had been and why she had stopped going to church. My sister was previously very close to God and went to Mass every Sunday. She didn't know how to answer because she had no idea how the girl knew all this. When they got off the bridge and were on the other side of the road, my sister thanked her. But she didn't answer and let go of her hand, telling my sister to leave. When my sister met her group of friends, they asked her why she hadn't crossed the road with them. My sister answered that it was because she had helped the girl, but they, intrigued, told her that there was no girl in that place. Something curious is that when my sister's friends crossed the road, a small incident happened. It didn't happen to anyone, but if my sister hadn't climbed the bridge with the girl, she would surely have been involved in the accident. In the end, it was never known who the girl was. The following man this that I will tell you happened to my father about 7 years ago. He is a taxi driver in the city of Fortin Las Flores, Veracruz. He had finished giving services and returned to the house. We do not live in the center of the city, but on the outskirts. It was the month of December and it was already dawn, maybe like 2 in the morning. That night in particular there was a lot of fog, so I came very slowly on the road, to get to the place where we live, the solid road surrounded by sugar cane seedlings. He was driving calmly and suddenly he saw clearly how a man fell on the car's trunk. My father immediately braked and got down to see because he was sure he had run over someone. When he gets out and checks with a flashlight, he can't find anything, so he gets in the car and leaves very quickly. When he got home, my mother asked him why he was so pale. She was worried because she thought he might have been robbed or something like that. But he ended up telling us what had happened. The next day, he told his companions about this, but they didn't believe him. So time passed until he forgot. But curiously, what did the year do? He went to the community of Zapopan, Veracruz for a client. It was around 3:45 in the morning and to get there he had to go through the same road. There was also fog. And exactly in the same place he saw how a man fell on top of the car's trunk. This time he reacted and tried to dodge it. But that made him get out of the road and get into a cane planting. He quickly went downstairs and checked, but there was absolutely nothing. This time he felt like vomiting and became pale again. As he could, he left and went for his client. When he arrived with his companions, he asked them for a cigarette. Everyone was surprised because he didn't smoke and asked him what had happened. He told them what happened, but as the previous time, no one wanted to believe him. My father, seeing that it was already twice, decided to investigate if someone had died at that point. Finally, a man of approximately 83 years told him that yes, that a cane cutter had died there. In previous years, they hired very humble people from the mountains to cut down the cane and transport them on the trucks. Once, 2 trucks full of people came to cut down. One of them fell because the truck got into an 8. When the truck that was coming behind it fell, it hit him. When my father found out about this, he set a watch on him in the church. Maybe he didn't know his name, but he asked for the rest of his soul. And it seems that it worked because now until the date it has not appeared again. The holo-figure this happened to me very recently. It was the early morning of August 22, 2016. I am from a town that is in the southeast of the state of Zacatecas called Noria de Angeles. The previous day was Sunday and I, like every weekend, went with my girlfriend to her town, which is Villa Garcia, Zacatecas, which is about an hour from where I am. That Sunday we went for a walk to the city of Aguascalientes. It got very late and I only remember that we arrived at her house, Villa de Garcia, at 1:45 in the morning. We are both teachers and we had to start the new school cycle on Monday, and that's why I rushed to get to my town to rest a little more before going to work. I have to tell you that I am a free thinker. I don't believe in religions, gods or demons. I consider myself a prepared guy and I'm not afraid of all that they say, which for me are just things to scare the kids. I also confess that the only fear I felt at that moment was that I was driving a road to a house where there was a lot of insecurity, because in certain parts it was very lonely. As I said before, it's like an hour from my girlfriend's house to my town. I was driving a little slowly since it was raining very lightly and the road was wet. As I passed a little ranch called Ganero Station, there is a very, very lonely and straight road section. I was driving in that section and when I got to some little hills that identify my town, the following happened to me. Before I got to an abandoned mine, I felt like urinating, so I parked the car. My town was about 10 minutes away, but I felt like I wouldn't get there. I lowered the speed, put on the emergency lights and did a total high. When I looked at the front at a distance, I calculated between 180 meters. I saw that on the opposite side of the road something was coming down like bouncing. It was something black, round and big. At first I thought it was a cow or another animal. Suddenly that thing stopped, and at that moment I saw how from the place where it stopped it crossed something like a cloth or a black veil. This moved to the road where I was driving. It was something very strange since I had never seen something like that. I was a little scared, but more than anything I was surprised. I wanted to use my cell phone to record that thing a little, since it had appeared out of the ordinary. So I stopped seeing it for a moment to put my cell phone on and record it. When I turned my eyes to that thing, the blood froze. I was shocked. It was no longer a cloth floating. It was a being. I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman, but it was a humanoid. Totally black, dressed with what seemed to be a hood. His face shone like a hologram. He changed slightly when he moved. He came towards me making movements with his face. He looked like a kind of man saying no. He was a very thin and tall being. I calculate that more than 2 meters. Since that dress dragged him to the road, I was very scared because I swear I wasn't walking. That thing floated and brought in its hands a thick branch in the shape of a Y like a fork. It came towards me very slowly and I was petrified, so much so that I could hardly move. I realized that something was very wrong because I couldn't even press the button and raise the... I don't believe in God, so I didn't start praying or anything. I just took out forces from I don't know where and I was able to get rid of that paralysis I felt. When I finally could move, I started the car. And by that moment, the zero, whatever it was already about 20 meters from me. It made a very strange noise. I don't know how to explain it, but it was between a laugh and the noise that the grills make at the same time. It seemed eternal to me, since my car didn't move fast. And before I got to where the third one was on the road, I just took a jump and it flew away. Finally, I was at good speed and I was arriving at a flyover and a curve that is about 300 meters from where I had seen that thing. And suddenly I heard that they hit the roof of my car. When that happened, I almost got off the road and I killed myself. I was very disoriented and I still didn't go up to the car window. I realized because it smelled very bad like something rotten dead. So I kept driving and went up the window. A moment passed and when I got to a cruise about 5 kilometers from what happened I stopped for precaution. My town is about 3 kilometers from that cruise so I felt a little safer. When I stopped in that place they hit him again on the roof of my car. I felt like I wanted to get paralyzed again and as I could I accelerated like crazy to be able to get to my town and no longer be alone in the dark. I didn't look at anything anymore but I felt scared and helpless, that when I got to my town it might be 3 in the morning. I stood next to a light pole to light up the light. I took my phone and my hands trembled a lot. I called my house so many times until they answered me. It was so much my fear that I didn't want to get out of the car alone. When my mother and a nephew arrived, they were already waiting for me outside. My mother was a little worried when she saw me and asked me what had happened. I answered that I would tell her later. However, when I saw her face of amazement, I knew that she was not very well. Days passed and I was sick. I couldn't sleep or eat well. When I told my mother about that thing I saw, she just hugged me. Days later, I couldn't take my body anymore. I had vomiting, I didn't sleep and my neck hurt a lot. My mother convinced me to take me to a curandera since the medicine didn't help me at all. I refused to go to those places because I didn't believe in that. But I ended up going with that lady from my mother's town. She was an old lady. She prepared some herbs that she burned and made me a clean one with some fir branches and an egg. This lady was the one who told me what I looked at. First she asked me for details about the dress she was wearing, about the noises she made and even the aroma that was felt in the environment. She saw and told me very naturally that she was a witch, a little girl who was consecrating herself. I asked her how she knew that or why she was so sure. He only answered me not to look for her, since it was a very serious and very dangerous matter, that it was a coincidence that I had found her, that I would not play with that and that I would respect a little more because if not, I was going to die. To be honest, I did intend to return to the same place at the same time with a couple of friends, but when I heard the old woman I changed my mind. I listened to her because what she did to me completely cured me. I felt very good right away and that's why I believed what he told me. Even though I feel physically fine, I still can't get over some things. I still sleep with the light on all night and I don't drive for long hours. What affects me the most personally was having felt that fear. It was something I never want to see again in my life. I don't know why I felt so scared and couldn't at least record it or establish communication with that thing.